Thank you very much. I'm sorry for the technical problems and the conditions that were not ideal, but I think that
Yeah. Thank you very much. شكرا جزيلا وأعتقد إنه
Thank you, sir. I believe time is of the essence. I think I have to summarize in order to give the audience a chance to ask questions. I should like to thank those who have organized this meeting. I was asked to speak about the detainees and the abducted and unforced or arbitrary detention. Obviously, there are other civil society organizations in this 33rd session of the HRC that have covered this side of the events. Our organization, Without Chains, has another chapter to add. Regarding the abducted detainees and the arbitrarily detained people, this is something that befell many innocent and young peoples of the revolution without even having the right to practice the right to free speech. The militias do not want anyone to witness their crimes, to observe, to monitor, to document. For example, on the 11th of February, the majority of those who fell from the snipers were those who were bloggers, journalists who were taking photos and documenting what happened in the field, in the skirmishes where the hostilities are happening. And if they gave this information to their friends, they would be detained as well. As for the detainees, we used to receive some information about them. However, there are some arbitrarily detained people who were considered unforced disappearance. We have no information about their whereabouts or what is their destiny. We believe this is one of the most important cases. This is part and parcel of the executive mechanism of the initiative of GICJ, as well as part of the initiative that was taken from the years 2011 to 2014, where decisions were taken to pay attention to this file, because this is of paramount importance to human rights. I personally, with a team from Human Rights, I was entrusted by the government, and I was given a list of 500 people who were arbitrarily detained. I sent letters to the areas whom we had information that they were the ones who abducted or who detained, such as the Republican Guard, the National Security, the Political Security, the police, many other agencies and police forces, and some militias who were not known. We sent letters to all of them and we gave them lists of the name. When many of them responded saying that they have no idea about these names and they are not detained with them, others did not respond. I personally went with visited the commander of the Central Intelligence, the chief of the Republican Guard. I also visited Abdel Malik al-Sayali and the chief of the National Security and the Political Securities. I visited all these people accompanied by human rights activists from the ministry, and we asked them questions about these people. We informed them and we asked them to inform the families that these people were abducted. Many people passed over all the prisons. As you know, these are formal prisons for normal criminals or for those who are accused of political crimes or political oppositions. But there are also secret prisons. The revolutionary young men who were detained, we used to have to guess, are they here or are they there? Where are they? And we were never able to access what is called secret prisons. One person said, I guessed where I was detained because they covered my eyes and they asked me, where are you? He said, I am in the National Security building. And they were surprised. How did he guess? because the headquarters of the national security is very close to his home where he lives. So he knew where he is because of the voice of the cleric who chanted the adhan. And he recognized the voice of the cleric. However, he was interrogated, he was tortured, he was forced to confess to things that he did not commit, and they took away his camera, his telephone, his laptop. They sequestered all these to get all the information contained in his computer, to get to know the information of other activists and their activities. This was one of the witnesses whom we met, and this man himself said that there was a large number of the detainees there, and unfortunately national security regime there were the same people who served the previous regime. This is what we call the grassroots of the regime. You can change the head of the intelligence center or agency, but the members and all the employees remain from the old regime. Secondly, we tried in the Council of Ministers to reach an agreement on the necessity of acceding and ratifying Unforced Disappearance Convention. They did sign it, and they tabled it to the parliament to ratify it. Unfortunately, the parliament aborted this act. Later on, we drew up a national law on arbitrary detention, on unforced disappearances, on abduction, on torture, and these crimes have to talking to when the information about this law was known, we received information from the south, from the 70s, people who came to give us information about their parents who were abducted, and until now they don't know their whereabouts. So we received a lot of information from the members of the families of all those who were abducted and forcibly disappeared. And one of the information that we received, that people told us daily when we sit to eat, we add a plate for my disappeared father, because we always expect at any minute that he will come home. We feel that they are still alive, they are here, and they will return home any minute. But those who are dead, there is closure, because people will accept that this person has died, and and that's it. This is the will of God. But those who remain unknown, their whereabouts and their destiny is unknown, their families live in permanent anguish because they can never reach closure regarding their situation. And they tell us, even if this person dies, even if our relative or beloved person dies or died under torture, we would like to know that. But to disappear like this in thin air without any trace is something very painful. As you know, with the new invasion by the Houthis, they took away all the achievements and the gains achieved by the government of national accord. I don't want to dwell, and I will move now to the last part of my speech. There is varying numbers regarding the detainees and the disappeared. Sum total, I would say 9,000 between political detainees. They are ministers, politicians, academicians, professors, doctors, engineers, activists, human rights activists, and many of them were subjected to humiliation, to ill treatment. Some of them, when they were released, they were completely psychologically destroyed. And some organizations had photos of those people who were secretly detained. Some of them were detained because they blogged something on Facebook or on their blogs. For example, you have Dr. Janin, who was detained for 9 months because she's a blogger. Even though she another doctor who was able to treat many people who suffered from leprosy, from many injuries. He's now in Canada because he was threatened, and he is lucky to have been able to move to Canada. Many other doctors whom we know, when they were released, they had to swear that they will take a sermon of silence, otherwise they will be detained again. Some of them had to support the legality, which is the national coalition, and some of us, there were posters of our photos, about 52 of us, political thinkers and all. We had posters all over the country saying wanted for justice, just because we were pro the coalition. In conclusion, the mothers of the detainees who formed a sit-in in front of the headquarters where people are detained, they were beaten and they were threatened and humiliated, and they have now sent a humanitarian letter to ask the Human Rights Council to work and bring pressure to bear in order to release their children. They tasked me and tasked all those who work in the field of human rights to bring pressure to bear in order to release their children. Thank you
very much for your very lively and detailed description and human description of the situation. We have now our last speaker. This is Ms. Aswan Mohammed. She is the programs director at Balkis channel and the presenter of the weekly political program called Al-Fada Al-Hur. Mrs. Aswan is also a member of the Syndicate of the Yemen Journalists and a member of the Board of Trustees of the Women Journalists Without Chains organization. Please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. على سيرة الفضاء.
Speaking of free space, media space has become smaller than the hole of a needle now. We are an international civil organization caring for human rights. Yemenis currently are living the most heinous memory, which is the second memory of overthrowing the government by the Houthis and Saleh, who invaded the capital, and one of their first objective was the media, and the first building to be shelled was the official TV station and the workers in that building. This was in full view of the whole world, even though the TV was publishing live at the moment. After the television station, the second victim was the Ministry of Information. In the first days, the Houthis offices and the civil and NGOs reaching the individual journalists and all those who work in the media, up to detaining and torturing individuals who work in journalism and in the media. This is not just our version of the events. This is the situation in Yemen since 2014. Nothing is safe in Yemen. If we speak about freedoms and rights in Yemen, this is something of the past. We can even we cannot predict that. What we can predict is that journalism in Yemen will be extinct. There is no other voice in Yemen except the voice of those who overthrew the legitimate government and the Houthis and Saleh. One cannot say that we have free journalism according to the universal standards. These Yemeni journalism was one of the best journalistic working on international standards in the past in comparison with other Arab countries. I'll give you an idea of the general atmosphere, how the journalists worked in Yemen. In the past, the journalists, political parties, and civil societies worked earnestly to expand the space of freedom. However, all these movements did not really materialize concretely because the authorities continued to treat the journalists in a traditional way. However, the revolution came with a new revolutionized thinking. Many capitals were directed to establish free outlets for free media. Moreover, the National Dialogue Conference in 2011, which was building and putting the basis for a democratic country before it was overthrown in 2014. In that conference, all the important parties in the country participated in order to guarantee the freedom of the press in a manner compatible with the demands of the journalist and on the basis of international standards to guarantee the freedom of speech, cartoons, drawings, expression, opinion, and that no person or journalist can be imprisoned because of his opinion, and any person can reveal their belief or doctrine without being punished, and no newspaper can be closed down or confiscated without a legal warrant by virtue of the latest laws. Hence, this proves to us that Yemen was quite advanced as far as the print and publicity and press laws. If we study these provisions, we see that we have lived major setback in the freedom of the press in Yemen, to the extent that the freedom of the press in Yemen was described as that it's living the worst situation since the beginning of the last century. Moreover, the document or the outcome of the National Dialogue document said that we have to break the control of the state on the media, and whether written, heard, or seen, and that they are we should prevent them from closing down these opinion and media outlets without a legal warrant. The lady is reading at full speed without realizing that she's being interpreted.
Slow down.
It's not a machine. Okay, so far that was an introduction. Now, in order to give you an idea of the history of journalism in Yemen, the report of our organization, which is entitled Towards Extinction, as far as the freedoms are concerned, it gives a list of all the violations dealt to the journalist from May to June 2016 regarding many. But what is more horrific is that the Houthis consider journalists as criminals, we concentrate on documenting the various violations committed by the Houthis, hoping that there will be legal prosecution against the perpetrators. We based ourselves on collecting information from expert organizations, on monitoring, on documenting, on the reports received by us, by other activists, and by the victims and their families, as well as the reports by journalists or their organizations after ascertaining the veracity of this information and the violations underwent by these journalists in Yemen. Major figures in this report are the totality of violations are 368, 120 extrajudicial detention, 22 32 beatings, 17 murders, 8 attempt to murder, 9 torture, 6 repression, 16 confiscation, 38 threat, and others. Because Madam is reading very, very fast and she doesn't realize she's being interpreted. If she reads, the interpreter has to read. She has to talk if she wants to be interpreted. She cannot read.
Yeah.
If she reads, the interpreter has to have the paper in front of her. $368 cases of violations. Militia, Al-Houthi and Saleh, 281, meaning 76.5%. Unknown sources, 340 cases. The government, 16 cases of violations. Arab coalition, 4.3. Qaeda, 12 cases of 11 cases. Revolution and resistance, 1.9. Moreover, there are recommendations. I think it's... Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think there is one thing for sure that if I compare this case with the previous one of Iraq, Yemen is much better documented, and this is thanks to you. I think that the interpreters will naturally finish their time. I'm not sure if there will be interpretation. I suppose there will be, because we have, even if we have the room, which I'm not sure, I think that the interpreters might not be here to make the interpretation. I see 6 or 7 demands of interventions. We have 2 minutes. I mean, the only thing I can propose to you is that you make very short and very rapid question. If you are not fast enough, I have to cut you the speech. Please, starting by there, immediately.
سؤال سريع.
Two questions. The first question. The organization is an organization of journalists and it's concerned with the issues of journalism and it wants to see free journalism. How can a journalistic organization, how can it issue a report, a legal report? We know that they don't have people in the field. Since you said from the beginning that it is very difficult to reach the places where events took place, particularly as regards the Allied forces. How could you investigate these things? Thank you. In this report on page 139, I believe that there was concentration on Sana'a and there was not enough retention. Aden also faced so many crimes. and there was the massacre which led to 107 people killed, and a number of about 8,000 injured, most of them children. I believe the report has concentrated on one part of the country only, Muscat, and they did not deal with the southern parts of the countries. So I believe that they concentrated on Sana'a only.
Know where can we go right now, and I'm afraid that the interpreters will not be ready, and we are really on the time. Perhaps one or two questions, and please be very fast there in the back, and then you.
Thank you very much. My question is directed to Mr. Qatabi. I want to thank him for that breakdown in statistics. My question is about, given the evidentiary standards used by the UN to monitor, collect, and analyze data, how do you reconcile the two sets of data in your report versus the report of the High Commissioner, who stated that 61% of the deaths in Yemen are caused by coalition airstrikes, 16% being from terror groups, and 23% from the Yemeni army and popular committees. And when it comes to injuries, also in that report, the High Commissioner states that 52% of the injuries are caused by coalition airstrikes, and versus 42% for the Yemeni army and popular committees. So I just wanted to see, how do you reconcile the two sets of data based on the evidentiary standards that you used? And then the second question is, there was not much reference to civilian infrastructure damage or the blockade, the effect of the blockade on the Yemeni civilian population all over across.
Thank you very much. Now the last question, and then we cannot have more time, and we will try to wind it up. Please.
شكرا على هذا الجهد الطيب.
Thank you very much for this effort. For what I would like to ask a question. The legal person should not, when he talks about human rights, how can a person who has a Nobel Peace Prize, how can she adopt one position, particularly that the United Nations calls the militiat of Salah as therefore then so people will be adopting the same terminology that you are using, and you have studied law.
I just want to respond to the to that question about how you go about comparing the reports. There is no way to compare reports, because you go into different sources. So the UN has their own resources. They go, they go to different places. So when you do an investigation or research, you go to the place where you were conducting the research. So they might be going to a different sites or different individuals. So this is a small team, went to the places they were able to record some of that information, and they did. And that's why the report is different, and so you can't really compare that kind of report.
I'm very sorry, I have really to finish because we are intimated to do so. We have to leave the room. But I would just like to say that I am very, very happy for this. I think that this has to go on, this debate has to go on. The Nobel Peace Prize made a very, very good presentation of the issue. We are seeing a humanitarian catastrophe that follows several others in the region, and I think it has the same causes and the same perpetrators. And I wish you continue your work, your dedication, your efforts, and do not despair. Thank you very much.